Welcome to Thriving in the Game, a podcast dedicated to exploring what Black women need to navigate the corporate world of technology, offering insights, strategies, and personal stories that will affirm, validate, and encourage you on your journey up the corporate ladder. I'm your host, Alicia. Join me as we learn how to thrive together. Hey there, we're back with a few bonus episodes highlighting some additional personal stories and what I like to call profiles in thriving. This first season was all about the early to mid and transitioning career ladies, with each conversation centered around strategies, tips, and tools to help you thrive in your career. We discussed recognizing the level of ownership you have and where you choose to develop your career, although you may need to pivot when necessary. We also talked about understanding your values and leveraging them as you craft your career and build your personal brand. And rounding out the season, we emphasized how to maneuver in the workplace authentically as you balance the successes, challenges, and life. Our guests from this season imparted their personal reflections from what they've learned over time as they've navigated their respective career journeys, sharing insights from their hard-earned and often hard-fought lessons in corporate tech. But what does it look like to walk out that journey as an early career Black woman today? This first profile in Thriving highlights the career journey of Lola Adesina, a rising agile leader building her boss status in the world of consulting. Lola is an impressive example of approaching your career with intention, building your career plan through strategic goal setting. Lola reiterates the need for establishing genuine relationships early on, creating strategic goals and assessing your progress, learning how to sift through the bones and meat as you gather feedback, and she reminds us that it's never too early to begin passing along the value of what you receive from mentorship to others. Join us in this conversation as we learn more about Lola's career and what it looks like to thrive as an early career Black woman in tech.
So my journey into the project management space occurred at the end of undergrad. I majored in computer science and took an internship working as a developer for the summer. And I just realized that wasn't as fulfilling as what I thought it would be. So I started getting closer to the project managers that were actually aligned to that internship. And I liked the fact that I was able to marry business and technology and still be relatively close to the products that we were delivering. So after that, I went into business analysis for a second internship and then got into project management at my current employer. I've been with them for about 4 years now, so I've seen the ins and outs of different projects and been able to deliver various complexities when it comes to projects. So from simple proofs of concepts to full-fledged mobile applications that you can find on like the Apple Store or Google Play. So that's a little bit about my journey. And then as far as professional development, I've always been a person that looks to get feedback or to continuously improve. I want to make sure that I'm doing my job correctly, right? I just want to make sure that I'm hitting the mark in terms of career growth as far as 6 months in, a year in, and just making sure that I am continuously honing my skills and just being the leader that I need to be for my team to be successful.
I remember one of the things that I noticed about you when we first started working together is you scheduled time with me and several other leaders on our team, and really, I think throughout the organization. How important was it to you to just set that time with people, and what was the intention behind that?
One of the things that I heard going into full-time employment as a project manager was the need to establish relationships early on. So coming out of an internship, I had some connections. I wanted to continue those and make sure that that line of communication was still intact, as well as create some face value with different people that I might run into in the office on projects, and just make sure that they were able to connect a face to the name and vice versa. And yeah, just create those genuine relationships early on and just make sure that I have mentors and colleagues and peers that I could go to in times of need for anything as I'm getting acclimated to the organization.
And how have you, I guess, nurtured those relationships? Do you feel like it was more transactional in terms of just the work that you were doing, or has it been important to you to keep those relationships going?
To be honest, at first it did start transactionally, coming out of an internship and just making sure that you are in good graces with a lot of your leaders. And then as time goes on, you have more intentional conversations. You start learning about their families and what they're going through outside of work. So those connections just genuinely grew from there. I think it's important to not only know about the lives of your colleagues and peers within the walls of your organization, but to ask intentional questions, because at the end of the day, we're all people dealing with things that are bigger than work. So yeah, just continually having those conversations, and as you feel comfortable, ask a little bit about their home life and vice versa and share. It's a little scary being vulnerable in the workspace. I think a level of discernment is also important in terms of just like sharing different things with different leaders. That's something that I had to learn a bit early on as well.
That's really good. Having that level of discernment, understanding who you can communicate with, building a relationship. But yeah, you have to have boundaries with certain individuals. And so what are some of the ways that you did that? Was it just scheduling consistent time or?
Yeah, of course. Early on, it was a bit more consistent as far as maybe every 2 weeks or every week. And then depending on how the conversations were going, if I needed more assistance, more guidance, we would schedule more time on a more frequent basis, or just reel it back in just a little bit and meet monthly just as a way of maintenance and just checking in. I think it just depends on where I am in terms of just like the journey and the project that I'm aligned to. Like we said, if I needed a bit more personal communication and I was able to have those conversations with the leader, checking in and just seeing how I'm doing as far as just like personal life and how it's affecting work life and things like that. So yeah, it just depends on our level of relationship as well as where I am in terms of business efforts.
Let me take a step back for a second. So there was something you said. So initially you started in university pursuing more of a career in development. And then once you had an internship, you realized that project management was a better fit. So tell me about, how did you even come to an internship? Like, was it, again, because we're thinking about intentionality of your career, was that just more of like, hey, it's a checkbox, or what made you really pursue the internship and get to that place of, let me figure out if this is a career that I really want to pursue?
One of the buzzwords that we were hearing junior and senior year of college is internship. So I found an internship in my major. So I just took first thing that came to me. And I realized pretty early on, I was like, oh, this is different. Like, I don't think I could do this for years. Like, you guys seem to love it, but I just know this is not exactly what I would want to do, being a developer. I think I realized that like week 2 or 3 into the internship, but I was like, okay, let me find somebody that is doing what I want to do and quickly attach myself to them, shadow them, and see how to progress from here. I think failing fast or just like learning quickly about what your likes and dislikes are when it comes to your work makes your overall life a lot better. I just knew that if my work was not fulfilling, I felt like my life was just not going to be what I envisioned for myself. So literally one of my mentors, I talk about this moment all the time. I was sitting at my desk, clicking away, doing God knows what, trying to be a developer. I look up and I see her walk across the room, and she just exuded this like aura of being a boss woman. And I was just like, who is that? I want to be like her. So I found her name, realized that she was in project management, business analysis, and we just hit it off like that. I set up some time for lunch with her, and she told me about her journey, and that kind of gave me the push I needed to pivot into something different. She and I have been close ever since, as a mentor, as a colleague, just someone that I could bounce ideas off of.
Wow. There are a lot of good nuggets in what I hear you saying. So one, you had an internship opportunity. You were very quickly able to, one, identify that it wasn't necessarily a good fit, very quickly able to realign. And then, as you said, were able to pivot. You found mentorship in terms of getting you closer to what you thought that goal might be. Even for myself, I was a marketing major and ended up in IT, but realized I had more of a passion around technology and just the dynamics of it all versus working in advertising, for example. So I think it's very healthy to understand you can start off in a career, and the internship may be a great way for you to test that out in university. But if you realize that this is not necessarily a good fit, start working on and strategizing towards the next role or next opportunity. Do you feel like these are just abilities you started with, or was this, in terms of, again, that intentionality, something you developed over time through mentorship?
I think it was just a little bit innate. My parents really instilled a lot of ownership in me, the ability to take initiative. And if there's an opportunity to lead, you jump on it. So I feel like from early on, and then just like by position of birth, it just ended up being that I was a natural leader in some aspects. I think a lot of it was just instilled in me growing up as a child. And then I was able to take it from a professional lens and develop it through more networking opportunities and then more strategic forms of educating myself in terms of like reading different articles or going through different courses, going to different events for women's networking or professional development.
Having that background and then having gone through your internship, having identified a mentor, and then starting in your career. From the beginning, you were very intentional about creating relationships, developing in your career, developing in your role as a project manager. How have you continued that development over time?
I've had to learn how to create goals. I think coming out of college and starting in a project management role, I was a bit lost in terms of where to go from this position. So learning how to create goals and how to track them and how to actually measure if you're making progress, that was a learning curve for me, just how to even dream beyond where I'm at right now. We have a structure at my organization that just allows you to check where you're at currently in your role. And then there is a few check boxes that you would want to hit for the next position up. So I leaned on that a little bit in terms of just making sure, like, ideally, these are the things I need to hit to meet the requirements, exceed the requirements, and so on and so forth. So that's been a strategy for me as well. But I guess for someone who doesn't have that structure, I think leaning into other peers that are at your level of professional development and then seeking mentors that might be one or two roles ahead of you and seeing if they can impart any guidance or insight. I know there are tons of resources out there in terms of professional development. If you're looking for ways to better yourself in a specific area, I'm a huge advocate for LinkedIn Learning. You can look up anything on there, whether it comes to like professional speaking or public speaking or leading teams. There are tons of resources out there that I've had to click around and do my Googles on, but eventually I found what I was looking for. And then sometimes it does take an investment in terms of maybe going to a conference or going to a networking event or joining different cohorts that allow you access to certain people that can also impart that guidance and wisdom and just give you some of the gems that they've encountered on their journeys as well.
When I think about you as an individual, you are really our target audience, right? Like you were a representative of the young ladies that we are focused on as part of this podcast. So as you're comfortable, tell me a little bit more of that process of feeling lost and having to figure out how to set those goals. How did you shift or pivot in your vision to realize, hey, I'm in project management. Where do I go from here?
Right. Again, I kind of looked for the leaders that looked like me and that had been in the industry for a while. So coming in, I was relatively young. I was in my early 20s getting started as a project manager. And then I realized that there were other leaders that had been doing this longer than I had been alive. So I was like, I need to talk to those people. I need to talk to those leaders that have had some longevity and success in terms of continuously growing in this industry, because clearly there's space to grow if my leaders are still in this position and still have tenure in this track. So looking for leaders that look like myself and that have been doing this for a while. And then again, just setting up those initial conversations, sharing what my goals were, sharing my struggles, sharing exactly where I was, and seeing if there were any alignments in terms of those feelings, any support that they had to give in terms of where to go from there. And then there were times where the leaders didn't have things for me, but they were able to point me into the direction of somebody that was able to help me. So I think just putting yourself out there and just sharing what your intentions and goals are is the first step. Even if the first person you don't chat with is able to help, they can help point you in terms of like resources and things that you could try out. But yeah, I think I had to get over the fear of being perceived and then the fear of looking like I don't know everything. I think that was also a learning curve. At some point, you want to grow and you have to accept the fact that you learned everything or you know majority of where you're at right now. And you have to admit that there's other things that I don't know. So let me share that with somebody and see where we can go from there.
What was the perception that, I guess, created some angst?
Yeah, I think the perception is just like not being able to hold my own in a certain capacity, or just being perceived like I don't know as much as I should.
Okay.
Yeah. As a full-time employee for the first time, I think there's a lot of pressure in terms of just like making sure those first 3 to 6 months are solid and making sure that you look like you have all your ducks in a row.
And it's helpful to know that feeling, I don't think, ever goes away.
Right.
It's every time you start a new role. It's every time you start a new project, especially if you're in consulting, or even if there's a new opportunity, there's always kind of that feeling of, let me make sure I look like I have it all together. And most of the time, most of us don't. You do need help in some respect. But I do think it's good for the audience to understand that feeling's going to be there. And I think there's a lot of empowerment in terms of saying, be vulnerable, again, as you mentioned, with the right people.
Right.
And seeking out that opportunity for guidance. So we talked a little bit about it, and I know you said in your organization there is a structure. And for a lot of people, there isn't really a more formal structure for capturing feedback. How have you pursued or captured feedback? Is it something that you've just done on a schedule? Is it something that you've tried to incorporate in terms of like how you manage your career?
Yeah. So with my current org, I do go into different projects knowing the things that I'm trying to get better at or get feedback on. So I let my peers know. If I have a senior leader on the team, I let that person know as well. Like, this is how I'm trying to grow throughout this engagement. If you notice anything that kind of falls under this umbrella of like things I'm trying to grow in, feel free to ping me, send me email. You can write it up in a formal structure, send it to my people leader, but definitely capture any type of feedback that aligns with what I've shared with you in terms of growth for my journey. And then make sure that I'm asking like at different parts of the engagement. So at the beginning, I let them know this is what I'm trying to work on. Maybe like towards the middle, I'm just like, okay, have you noticed anything that aligns with the goals that I'm trying to achieve that I shared with you? And then at the end, I definitely want to capture either client feedback, leadership feedback, working with my developers on the team, just making sure I have a range of feedback from different people who have worked with me for different amounts of time, or we had different levels of face time. Just wanted to see a robust view of how I've come across as a leader.
That's really good. That's really, really good. There are statistics that tell us that Black women will often face challenges capturing solid feedback, whether it's sometimes they're in an environment where people are quite vague, or it's, oh, yeah, everything's great. But then on the back end, the comments will come back. And so I think in terms of what you're saying, even if that exists, there is opportunity to seek feedback from all of the different people and levels that you're working with. So even if you're not necessarily getting it from like your direct people leader, you can get it from working with developers or testers or even your end users or your client group. So I think it's helpful for people to understand you can get a really good picture of where you are and get good feedback on where you'd like to go, even if it's not necessarily one-to-one with your manager.
I think your manager has a limited view of how you engage with others. So definitely getting that range of feedback from different people, even those that you like work with in the office on things that might not be aligned to client work. If you're doing any initiatives that are more internal to your organization, I think getting feedback there is helpful as well. But yeah, your manager doesn't see everything that you are aligned to. So it's important to have different perspectives.
Have you ever had to deal with either like vague feedback or even feedback that almost felt more of personal critique versus really being constructive? And if so, how did you navigate that?
Yeah, early on, I thought every piece of feedback had to be taken and applied, but I had to also sift through the bones and the meat type of thing. So if I see some feedback that is more personal or more of a styling issue, for example, I had a leader, they wanted bullet points in their status reports, and I did a numbered list. I was just like, okay, if this leader wants a similar structure to a bulleted list, sure, fine. But it's not something that I would take personally or ruminate on. Learning to sift through your feedback is important. And it's important to realize like what's helpful and what's not, and understand what isn't supposed to be taken personally, essentially.
I like how you said you learn to sift through feedback. Can you expound on how you learn to do that? Because I think it's hard, right? Like coming in, and I mean, I know I still deal with it sometimes, that you can receive feedback that even if you're not trying to take it personal, it does affect you, right? And so for someone early in their career, I think it's helpful to understand that you may encounter that, but I also want you to have strategies to navigate that very quickly so that it doesn't have an adverse impact on you and your confidence and your work. So can you expound on how you learned to do that?
Yeah, I think I took the feedback and shared it with my immediate people leaders, and those leaders would know more of like the goals I'm trying to achieve. And I would share and be like, hey, this is what I heard. Does that align with things that you're seeing? I personally think if 2 or 3 people are saying the same kind of thing, then it's probably some feedback that you need to implement. But if I shared it with a leader that knows my goals and knows my journey and they are not particularly concerned, then it might be something that you can just take and not ruminate on, implement, or take personally. And then just having some resolve about your brand and how you show up, knowing what your goals are, what your purpose is, and what you're trying to accomplish. If you're pretty solid about where you are and where you're going, it's easy to let a few things roll off your back. That's another thing that I've been learning in terms of just like feedback is just resilience in some areas. There's always going to be someone that has something to say, but knowing who you are, what you're trying to achieve, if it doesn't align with that, it's easy to just ignore a few things.
Again, it goes back to that intention. And like you said, having your plan, setting your goals, knowing what you're working towards. There can be feedback along your journey that helps you get there faster. But then there are some things that I don't want to say dismiss because that sounds rude, but I like how you put it. Let it roll off your back. You don't have to apply everything. Yeah. Like you said, there's that sifting process, even bouncing that off either your people leader or other people that really know your goals, like your mentor, even some peers, right? And then once you realize something is applicable, then how do you apply it?
Look for resources that address the certain feedback. LinkedIn Learning, that's one of my go-to in terms of free resources. So one of the things that I was trying to grow in was facilitation. So facilitating meetings, running efficient meetings. There's tons of videos, tons of courses. So if there's feedback specifically geared towards a skill, you can type it into LinkedIn Learning and find it that way. Another thing that I found helpful was maybe shadowing a senior leader and seeing how they facilitate. I did have bi-weekly meetings with my leaders, and we would just go through different tips and tricks for addressing some of the feedback that I got, or just like any skills that I wanted to brush up on, and then maybe take some internal opportunities that aren't client facing just as ways to practice. Maybe host a lunch and learn as far as having an opportunity to facilitate in a safer space, or going to a conference or a networking event and then sharing within your teams about things that you've learned. So things like that.
I think that's really good because there are some of us who may be in an environment where we don't get a lot of support from our manager. You may not have the best people leader. And so I think it's helpful to know that early in your career, that's not your only source of development and growth. And so I like how you've pointed out you can pursue LinkedIn learnings. You can pursue conferences. You can pursue other avenues to really help you grow in the areas where you're trying to upskill. In terms of upskilling, what things have you leveraged to continue developing you as a project manager and even towards your goals beyond this role?
Yeah, leveraging different tools like my network, as well as just staying abreast of what is happening in the industry as far as technology and different tools that project managers are using has been really helpful. And then I always think it's important to be in demand at all times. That's how I think about it. Whatever I need to do to stay useful to my team and to my work, I definitely need to jump on it. In terms of just like job security in general, or just like staying sharp and making sure that what you are bringing to the table isn't outdated. Leveraging my network in terms of seeing like where my peers are headed, where industry leaders are headed, and looking into different articles, different subscriptions that are giving information as far as the the new technologies that are emerging, the new tools, or how people are leveraging those tools. I think those have been my go-tos in terms of staying knowledgeable and making sure my skills are still relevant.
And what's an example of that? Like, what's something that you feel like has become, whether it be a tool, certification, what has been important to you lately?
I think cloud is always important. Getting certified in the different cloud platforms has been helpful, as well as things like a Scrum certification, things that are immediately relevant to being a project manager. Other things include networking events or conferences like Afrotech, Render ATL that are geared specifically towards technology, product management, and give you an opportunity to engage in workshops that help you develop your skills as a product manager, project manager, just ways to have hands-on experience with other industry leaders, as well as giving you practical steps that you can impart when you go back to your organization.
Once you have that knowledge, how do you express that in the workplace?
Taking the skills that you've learned in those various areas and actually implementing them with your team. So if you learned a different way to facilitate, let's say a retrospective or a sprint planning, using bits and pieces of what you learned, maybe not all at once, but just like gradually introducing something and seeing how your team reacts to it. Maybe share that you want to try something new with your team leads or your developers and ask them to be a fly on the wall and see if they can read the room for you, see how others are engaging with it and give you feedback there. That's a way to see that if something that you learn is being impactful or not. I think other ways that I personally have shared is writing. So I put out an article about professional development just to have a way to express what I've been learning on my journey and share it with my network and other people that are going through similar experiences. I've also recently developed a relationship with my mentee, and she and I have been learning together, honestly. So she went to my alma mater, Franklin and Marshall College. We have similar experiences in terms of needing to navigate the workspace a bit differently coming out of a liberal arts school, and just making sure that we are staying connected in terms of me providing information that I've learned, sharing things from my network with her, and doing what I can with what I have, honestly, just to give her some guidance in that aspect.
I love that. And I ask that level of detail because I think it's helpful when you are early in your career and really trying to figure that out, right? Like it took some figuring out to say, okay, well, these are the things that I need to develop. How can I develop them? And then once I learn how to upskill in those areas, how do I apply it to not only my personal development knowledge, but also I can leverage this with my team. I can test it out. I can see if attending this workshop was useful because you want to be able to see if you can put this into practice. And even outside of that, then also sharing that knowledge with your own mentee. And I would advise anyone, even if you are early in your career, you're still a step ahead of someone else. So you can always, just as much as your mentors provide you with valuable information, you are now also providing someone else with that valuable information. Just one last question. Looking back in terms of where you were in university, knowing what you know now, is there any other advice that you would give to yourself around setting goals or processing feedback or creating that career growth plan?
The main thing I would want to tell my younger self was the importance of networking. I don't think I did too much of that in college, and that would have been the perfect place to practice, just like establishing different relationships across majors, across different orgs that I was a part of. I definitely would have encouraged myself to get a bit out of my shell a little bit during college because, that's a perfect place to develop your soft skill. That networking piece was key.
Well, thank you so much, Lola. I really appreciate you taking time to speak with us and sharing your knowledge, your expertise, and your experience. I hope our listeners can really take something from your journey and apply it in their own walk. And just really appreciate you being here. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
I really hope you enjoyed this episode. Take some time to reflect on what you heard here. Be sure to follow us on IG and subscribe to our newsletter on Substack. Find us at Thriving in the Game on both. If you have a comment or recommendation, DM or email me. You can find my email in the show notes. I'd love to hear from you as we build community around thriving in the game. Until next time, take care.